we're just watching the traffic go by here in front of our house.
Well, we just had a customer pull out.
We just had a customer pull in?
Yeah.
Well, while I'm waiting for the video to populate, Laura's going to run over there to the store, and when she comes back, we'll have a little conversation. So, maybe wondering why we're doing a video here in the middle of the day when we're kind of in the first part of the growing season here, but we're kind of taking a little bit of a slower day today. We had a large group of folks here yesterday, probably over 200 homeschoolers that we showed around the farm, and that took about a week of prep, just kind of cleaning up the place and getting things ready. And but yesterday was a long day for that, so we're kind of taking a slower speed day today. So hanging out a little bit. I actually took a nap today, which is something I've not done in a long time. And we thought it'd be a great time to jump on here, do a little live stream, see what's going on with all you guys here. So hopefully you guys can hear me, and hopefully the live stream is up and going. Should have Laura check on her phone when she gets back. But so something was pretty cool for me. Oh, here she comes. No, going in the house. Something's been kind of a dream of mine a long time, was to write something that would be published here in the Stockman Grass Farmer, which many of you already get that publication. That's something I've read for probably 18 years now, and met Alan Nation a few times when he was alive, been to a couple of their schools, and had an article that I wrote that they were gracious enough to publish in this May one, and it discusses the two opposing mindsets or ideologies when it comes to managing animals, and they kind of can be boiled down to a management mindset or a containment mindset. And what do I mean by that? Because you do manage contained animals as well, but management would be defined as you are managing that animal in relationship to its unique physiological expressions or habitats that it likes to live in. But instead of your emphasis of management being just straight up containment, it is managing that animal in a more habitat compatible way. So one of the things I think the local sustainable pasture based movement struggles with sometimes is that we are moving animals back outside, but all that we're doing is just taking the barn away from it and maybe not fully addressing the deeper issues of management. And then sometimes we'll see the results of what that does. You can't just take away a hog barn and put a couple hundred pigs into an outside pen and begin to call that sustainable or natural or regenerative or whatever the term of the week has to be. In some ways, it's almost more ecologically damaging to have that moonscaped pen outside than it is to just keep the animals in the barn to begin with. Because if you think about it, there's erosion issues and runoff issues that can be caused with poor grain cropping and tillage methods. But having a huge group of animals in a small area that is moonscaped, you are causing the same issues there as well. So when we're talking about management, it's how do we manage these animals on the landscape in a way that is not going to cause all of these problems that sometimes we can see. And with the systems that we've used on our farm and developed, how do we do that in a cost-effective and efficient way? So that would be the next question that has to be tackled after after we recognize that, hey, we can't just take the barn away and have the animals in the same type of space, or not much more of a space than that. We also have to manage the impact on the ground the runoff issues and erosion issues and so on, that will bring up the inevitable question of how do we do these things without incurring a huge expense and having so much money sitting out there in fence and gear that it just breaks the bank of possibly doing something. So if you guys can hear me, give me a thumbs up. I'm not sure if someone is sound issues or not, but anyway, so that's something that we worked on in the early stages of our farm, was developing how do we manage these animals on the field without having this insane expense problem as well. It can cost $600-800 per space, for a traditional sow barn. So how do we do it on the pasture for less? And that's another area where management comes in. That not only are we managing, for the impact that the animals are going to have on the ground, in particular that hogs will have on the ground, but we're also managing for what's the kind of animal that's going to work well in this low input system. So that comes back to having a pig that is compatible with the fencing that we're using, the regularity of which we are checking those sets on pasture, of which we're moving them, which we're feeding them. I've got three little nuggets poking their heads out the door over here. Go inside. So they're fine there. So your management program ends up becoming a whole system. That it's not just the gear that we're using, it's not the fence that we're using, but it's also the feeding regimen, the checking of the animals, how many times a day we're doing that, our frequency of watering, and so on. That's how we've developed a farrowing system where instead of our cost per sow being $600-700 per sow, it's around 100 or less. It's an animal that works with the management system, and it's a management system oriented around the kind of unique characteristics of how that animal wants to express itself. And I think you'll see that apply across the board, whether it be pigs, cattle, poultry, ducks, whatever else you may farm, that there are certain practices that we can use in our management that can either make it easier on ourselves or more difficult on ourselves, out in the operations of the enterprise in the field. You can bang your head on the wall continually trying to make a chicken do something that it doesn't want to do, or making a duck try to do something it doesn't want to do. But a good management system will observe what are the tendencies and natural expressions of that animal, and then begin to, as the farmer, to begin to orient our management around those characteristics instead of directly confronting them and throttling them, which is more characteristic of a containment system. So, a good example of this would be one of the issues that I've seen mentioned in quite a few publications for the hog industry is stress, and that is brought on by the containment management system. But instead of orienting the management around what the animal's animalness is, as Joel Salatin would say, it's a direct, this is what works for an efficiency and scaled model, is to put these pigs in a big containment building, but it causes this big stress issue. You get into something that I call path dependency here, that when you move so far down a path of a particular management mindset, you no longer can think of solutions outside of a confined set of parameters that you've gotten yourself into. So, for instance, this issue of stress in hogs, the only way that we can solve this now for a confinement system is how do we edit the stress gene out of these pigs, or how do we selectively breed to remove a stress gene, instead of asking the fundamental question, why are these pigs stressed to begin with? So just a couple thoughts to add on top of the article that came out in this month's Stockman Grass Farmer. So it's a May issue. If you don't get that magazine, sign up for it. It's a great little publication that comes out once a month, mostly written by people who are actually in the field getting after it, producers who are sharing what's going on with them, things that they're working on. There's also a lot of good advertisers in there of different gear to use. So anyway, Laura has made it back though from making a sale, I hope.
Yes.
All right. We get a lot of questions. We'll shift gears here a little bit. We get a lot of questions about marketing in the group. I would say it's probably when you boil it down, probably the one of the two biggest questions. You have how do you produce stuff, and then how do you market it? And as Mark Cuban says, sales cures all. So when you're looking, Laura, in this space of local food, of selling things to the public directly off the farm, one of the big issues that is raised and people ask is, you guys are priced higher than what's in the store. Do you see that as a problem? And how do you communicate with your folks about this pricing difference? How do you sell something that is more expensive than what they can find somewhere else?
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess it is always the question, why is your meat higher? Why should I buy it? So a couple different things, I guess. Different ways to address it. It kind of depends on the person. And I generally try to ask questions to understand what's important to them. So if it's a mom who's, say, walking up with 5 kids and she's going, I can't afford to buy this meat, then hear her heart going, I have at least 8 mouths at home who are eating, who are growing kids, and we go through a lot of meat. So this means we're going to be talking about what does maybe custom processing for wholes and halves and bundle packaging of meat, and how can I get her a really good savings that she probably already has a big freezer and she can store 200-300 pounds of meat at a time, and so we can pass along that savings. And so I describe, what does that look like? How many, do they love ground beef and roast, or they love pork and sausage or pork chops? What are the things that they like, and how can I help them achieve, a closer percentage to, say, what Costco? Because, a lot of big families, they're buying from Costco. So they go, okay, I'm getting $5 ground beef from Costco. How can you beat that? So sometimes we do have to talk about cost, not just the quality. And so for me, I was actually just writing out a page for the families yesterday. They came on the tour talking about how if you get a whole animal, and if you are ever to splurge on roast or steaks, and say it's $12, $15, or $20 a pound, and say, maybe 4 times a year they splurge and get something like that, it's actually safe to say that my, on average, $6 a pound across the board for a whole beef is going to cost the same as $5 a pound ground beef and, say, $8 a pound steaks. So they, so you can definitely address and kind of break it down to an understanding that helps them see it in a different picture. Now, for the person who's walking up and say they already have grown kids, they're out of the house, and there's maybe 2 people at home. Well, half a cow is just
a bit much.
A bit much, yes.
Right.
So that's not really going to help them. But probably what they're looking for in some ways, if they've walked up to you, is because maybe they're interested in quality. Maybe they're interested in the meat that used to be raised like it did in the good old days. They remember
there's a texture and flavor that they're after.
Right. And so I think with that you can talk a little bit more about quality and sell them on the quality, and in the end what that means with your health and other things that correlate to that.
Well, I think it was something I think we came up with it many years ago when we got started. Was we weren't going to try to beat everyone else on price, but we were going to beat them on customer service. And that's something that the small producer direct from the farm can beat the big box retailer at, is that connection that they can have, that the public can have directly with us,
right,
as the producer. And we can we can beat price with a really good ground game and customer service and attention to their needs and
sure,
their details. So what are a couple ways that you give attention to your customers?
Well, I mean, what makes someone feel better than you walk into the store or show up at say in a grocery store line, and the owner of the place comes up and says, "Hey Bill, it's really good to see you. What's been going on? How were those pork chops last week that you got?" Like, I never get that, walking into a grocery store. And so I think something that customers value is the fact that you're paying attention to them. You've given them time and energy to know their name, to know how many kids they have, to, get involved with them a little bit more than just, oh, you're a customer, you're my $200 customer, you're my $50 customer,
Right.
And, every customer is the same, and they're a customer. They're farm friends, and
it can be hard, honestly, for those of you who do direct marketing can probably relate to this. It can be hard to give the same level of customer service to that continual 1 dozen egg person as it is to someone who buys a lot more. But you never know when that steady 1 dozen egg per week person, they have friends.
Right.
To the positive or the negative.
Sure.
Sure. If they feel scorned by you, everyone is a Yelp review away from, or Facebook review away from not good times.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's just an overall, in your mind, you don't need to be distinguishing, well, is this going to make a sale? Is this not going to make the sale? Because ultimately, it's not about the sale here and now. Sometimes it is, but most of the time, marketing, we're in this for the long haul. And so it's not making a sale where someone walks away and goes, oh, I should not have bought that because that was too expensive. Well, that's a bad feeling they're walking away with. What we need to be selling is the relationship of they made a good choice with the budget that they had, and you actually want to help them keep in that budget, because then if you helped them, they're going to want to come back again and go, hey, Laura, you helped me, stay within my budget. I was able to get the meat that I needed for this week. What ideas do you have for, for this week? I need some new ideas for meals.
Yeah.
And so it gives the customer trust, that you've helped them, that you're not pushing a sale on them. Who wants a pushy salesman? No one.
Well, too often, I think we confuse customer service with relieving them of some money.
Sure.
And that isn't always helping your customer or meeting their needs. And it's something Gary Vaynerchuk talks about. Too often marketers try to close the sale on the first
Maybe
the
a little
first
too
contact.
fast.
Yes, I mean, you take the girl out on the first date. You're not going to go all the way there. So
I was going to marry you.
right, better not have the ring in your pocket. And it can be hard though as a marketer to really drill that into your mind that you are there to help those people, and you believe, if you don't believe that your product is what will help them, you will suck at sales. But it doesn't always mean that they are going to get a bunch of your product.
Right, sure. Well, I mean, they need to taste it, they need to sample it, they need to see whether they really like it. Another thing that I do is I like to follow up with emails or a phone call or a text message, you know, and generally asking them, you know, hey, I didn't see that you placed your order this month. Do you need anything? Because, you know, sometimes the you know, MailChimp or iContact or whatever you use for the newsletter, sometimes those emails go in the spam folder and they never got it. Reaching out to them personally is really helpful, and them knowing that, you know, hey, you matter. You know, one thing I was thinking about is we had a restaurant who had just, you know, kind of stopped ordering from us. And, you know, I called them after a couple weeks and they kept going, no, we don't need any. And I knew that they had gone too long without, you know, our pork, and thinking that, oh, they were going to be out. And so I finally was able to talk to the owner, and he was like, oh, we just decided to go with someone else. And
Right.
I was like, oh, okay, well,
Right.
you know, just be considerate. You know, that's totally fine, but just be considerate for the next farmer. Just let them know in advance, because, you know, I already put your packaging and what you wanted stocked in the freezer for you
Right.
personally.
Right.
And so he goes, oh, well, you know, good feedback. Thank you so much for letting me know that. And it wasn't but, you know, three hours later or so, and I get a phone call back and said, hey, I talked it over with everyone, and we actually want to go ahead and buy from you. So I'm going to go ahead and order that 50 pounds. And it just totally blew me away that just because they heard that, hey, you make a difference, I want to buy from you. And that was crazy, but they do. They, you know, every single person makes a difference buying from your farm, and it was a big deal to me. And the cool thing is, you know, a year later, you know, they've doubled their order. And so
Right,
I could have just walked away, but I just decided to politely let them know. I didn't, you know, cuss them out or anything like that. I just kind of was like, hey, just, you know, let me know next
Right.
time in advance.
Well, and also too, you know, a sophisticated marketer can achieve, you know, a couple things with a well-worded statement. You know, yes, you know, you're helping them to be better with a different farmer, but you're also letting them know, hey, you know, I was doing this especially for you guys. So, you know, you can let them know at the same time, hey, here's how, you know, you can give them a little bit of training, but also say, hey, it'd be nice if you know, would stay with me, because you guys do matter to us. And, you know, if you can accomplish 2 or 3 things in one statement, you know,
Sure.
get them thinking a couple different directions, you can see the result of what happened, that
Sure.
they went and talked it over and circled back around.
Sure.
And they're still hanging around. So we're probably going to wrap this video up here, though, because it's starting to rain, and we're sitting outside, so we're like throwing little towels over the computer screen here. So
We need the rain, though.
we do need the
Praise
rain,
the Lord.
so we're not going to complain too much about it, as long as it stops around shore time. So thanks for hanging out, guys. I realized about halfway through that the audio was not on for the first half, but fortunately I was recording this with another camera. So we'll take that video and post that up as well, so you can hear the first part for discussion about management versus containment, an article that I just wrote that came out in Stockman Grass Farmer this month. So support them. If you don't get their publication, definitely check it out. I think they're moving into the online space as well, which is awesome. And we will see you guys next time. Until then,